Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Architecture of Health. I'm Deb Voisin, and this week my guest is Carol Bowles. I met her because she's a homeschool consultant and has a private school as well to support homeschooling families. Welcome to our show, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the reason I was attracted to having you on is I realize I've been running in these kind of different thinking communities that value lifestyle changes to create the best health outcomes for them and their families. And part, a big impact on a child's health or a family's health is the education structure, not only what they're being taught there, but the hours, the child's innate style of learning. And I realized that some of the listeners to my show are young mothers. Some of them don't ever want to vaccinate their children as part of the thing. And figuring this out before the children are grown up
Yeah.
is a good idea. And unfortunately, I didn't realize, guys, I was so bought into the old paradigms of education and health. It took a crash for and actually COVID. It took COVID to realize, no, I'm not going to send him to sit all day in a mask. I was like, we're going to do something else, and it really opened the doors to thinking differently. And Carol is one of the people that helped guide me, because it wasn't as easy as I thought. I thought, oh, you just do your own thing at home. No, well, if you're going to integrate into other systems later, there are certain ways to do things so that your effort gets you the most flexibility. So let's start with, how did you realize that you needed to do what you do?
Well, I was homeschooled for a while as a child. And my mother was into alternative living and everything that we are into now. And so I kind of was raised with that to start off with. I lived on a farm on 80 acres. I never went to school. We were unschooled. And so I had to go to school at the end of first grade. My parents got divorced and we moved from Michigan to California. And I did not know what school was. I didn't even know what to do the first day. It was really funny. But anyway, I ended up going to school, jumping through all the hoops, getting straight A's. But I always had that kind of alternative lifestyle from my mother in the background. I wasn't vaccinated my whole life. I've never been vaccinated once. And so my mom kind of is, I give her the credit for instilling into me a long time ago. And so when I had children, my idea was I didn't want them to go to daycare. I wanted to stay home and spend time with them, and no judgment of anyone who has to do that. But I wanted to set my life up a little differently. But I wasn't really thinking about homeschooling them that much. I kind of thought, oh, my son would just go to public school when he was in kindergarten. I was a teacher. I got my teaching credential. So my plan was to kind of start teaching. And so he went to school for kindergarten and first grade. And then in second grade, he was reading like at an eighth grade level in second grade. They didn't know what to do with him. And he loved learning about certain topics and like diving deep into them. He was super into dinosaurs at one point, or birds, or he'd have books laid out all over the floor and be reading like 7 reference books at once. So I just was like, this isn't serving him. He's very bored. During reading groups, he would just sit by himself and read. So I was like, well, I'm going to homeschool him. So I pulled him out of public school and started homeschooling him. And it was amazing. And that just led me on the journey. So all of my kids, my daughter, my second child, was homeschooled for a couple of years, but she really liked school and she wanted all the school things. So she went back. And then my youngest, I'm still homeschooling now. He's 17. So it's been a long journey.
Wow, from the very beginning. And
Yeah.
and then you decided to become a teacher. That's
I
interesting.
I became a teacher before I had kids. So yeah.
And what are and I heard in there can be more than one type of learner. There can be more than one type of social goal, like how your daughter wanted some of the things that came with school. So, and you've had 3 different kids with very different
Yes.
desires.
Very
Um,
different.
Now, uh, what do you see? Because you help a lot of other families.
Yeah.
What kind of other patterns outside of the experience you've had have you seen in when is homeschool or unschooling? Like, and there's first of all, there are probably way more flavors than one might think. I've
Yeah.
already heard you talk about unschooling, and then I hear you talk about these people, like groups of people getting together. Can you tell me about what are some of the flavors, the way homeschool tends
Yeah.
to form?
I feel like it's different. It's kind of changed since COVID because parents would kind of say, like, oh, I'm homeschooling now that my child is, schooling at home in their public school on the computer. And so there's this kind of, I would say, that's not homeschooling when your child is on the, it's a version of it, but I feel like homeschooling's kind of gotten tweaked a little bit because of COVID. But unschooling is families who don't want to recreate school at home and they want their child to learn through living and learn through experience. And so they don't necessarily, it's not sit down at the table and we're going to do a math worksheet today. It's let's cook and let's shop and budget and let's learn through just real life experiences. They're never forced to do anything school wise that, they're not interested in. And so it's kind of presented to them, and families that unschool well live a rich life and the child has lots of opportunities, and they kind of, when they find something they're into, they really dive into it. And I would say that's a lot, it done well, it's a lot of exposure. So just exposing your children. There's something in the unschool world called strewing, and you leave books around the house of topics, or maybe the parents are really interested in something, and so the child goes with them to learn about it. And so the whole family's learning together, which is really cool. There's no pressure, there's no stress in, meeting these government standards. It's a very free way of homeschooling.
I want to say when I worked at a company on a digital reader, it was like the Kindle and the Barnes and Noble, like digital readers. One of the things we realized was missing is that quality of when you see a book on a table, it's got a cover and it's got a physicality, and I could hand you the book and we could like when you said strewing and that indirect exposure, that's one of the real risks of this digital flattened smaller experience is the world getting smaller instead of bigger. And yet digital can also be broadening in other ways. So yeah, I definitely see what you were saying about someone sitting on a computer at home is not the same at all as now. And I've heard of world schooling where families just travel all over together and gather experiences.
Yeah.
So how do now at the same time, since I was moving from standard school, like we did a little Montessori, which was pretty beautiful, and then some private school, and then a little public school, and then COVID, and a lot more time outside in nature. But at the back of my mind, I was always like, well, there's some baseline academic tools that I wanted to make sure not to lose sight of, especially math. Yeah. I felt like I wanted to have the option to reintegrate into other systems. So how do you coach people in keeping the most options open when they're pursuing one of these non-traditional paths?
Well, I would say, first of all, I think it's Peter Gray who did a study that if you did no arithmetic and you lived just a full life and you cooked and you shopped with your family and you helped budget and you talked about math and you didn't have any formal math learning, like curriculum, and you waited till you were about 12 years old, and then you could learn all of arithmetic in about 6 months. That was the kind of finding of it. And so I think the most important thing is to have a love of learning and to teach your children how to learn. Because everyone's going to have gaps in something, right? It's not like the public school fills in all the gaps. So there's going to be gaps. They might be different gaps than the public school or a private school, but there's going to be gaps for everybody. So if you have that love of learning and you know how to learn, you can fill those gaps very quickly. So I would say that's the most important thing to make sure your child has when you're homeschooling them. And then when they do go to public school, they'll just have to catch up to some things if they were, quote, behind, according to but it's hard to public school with that. It's almost like you have one foot in and one foot out. And if you're constantly worried about that, it defeats kind of the purpose of homeschooling.
It doubles the stress. It doubles the stress.
You can't enjoy it fully if you're always in the background going, oh, but I need to make sure to do this because they might go back to public school someday. So you got to be a little careful with that. I think that's my opinion. Because then you're homeschooling with this anxiety hanging over your head the whole time, and you're not fully embracing the possibilities of it, I feel.
And it sounds like the socioeconomic structure of the household really affects the stress of the environment for homeschooling. Like you've taken the time to be home and expose, but it's also a different parenting model where kind of instead of hovercraft parents or hover parenting where the parent kind of comes in and doesn't let the child learn on their own. I know in the old days I'd read this book called The Continuing Concept or something like that. And the from the very beginning, once a baby being born, it being on the mother's back or at a certain age, looking forward, always following the mom. Like and it's not the mom putting the baby in front of her saying, what does the baby need now? So I get that there's a cultural inversion of kind of adult unspoken calm authority where you're building a life and the children are following you through it, because we have this, these factory based work and school schedules. Like the moms like me, I had a 9 to 5, and working out how I would homeschool, I was beyond my capacity. And then you added a commute. And then the fact that we lived in the forest far from the school, it was a pressure cooker. So honestly, COVID, where we had to do way less of everything, felt really good. Now, I love that you also stated this love of learning. In fact, that's one reason I have the podcast. I get to learn. Every single interview, I'm learning something new. And I'm kind of like a homeschool kinesiologist, to be honest. I pick whoever is the best at anything, and I go straight to them. I'm like, I want to study with you. I don't care. Oh, you're a sports kinesiologist. Oh, you're a physical therapist. You're a sports medicine person. You're a dance person. I'm like, I just know that you're really good, and I want to learn from you. So, I love that. Okay, so let's talk though about the mechanics. Have you seen what works in the family structure to do all the way homeschool?
You mean all the way like K through 12, all the way through?
At least where it's not this like, I might go back to public school. Like I might need to go, but like, is it? And okay, here's a myth that I know. Once I learned this, I was like, oh, I should have homeschooled this, because when I heard that in 2 hours, a homeschooler can get done what it takes an 8-hour day at an institution, I was like, oh, well, this idea that you can't have a job and homeschool seemed like a myth. And yet it would depend upon the child and the parents and what level of attention and privacy I think you each need to have. So talk about the structures of the jobs and the families where this really works out.
Well, I think the least stressful for everyone would be a situation where you have one parent, or however, there's a parent that is very available that doesn't have to try to squeeze work in during the time with the child, because that is stressful. But it can work too. Like, okay, you're going to go do this and I'm going to go online and work real quick if you had like an online job or something like that. But ideally, in my experience, it's been when a parent or two or the whole family sets it up this way, that at least one parent can be home with the child, doing life, like cooking, making breakfast, cleaning, doing chores, going grocery shopping, visiting grandma, going out into the world, going to your language lesson. Like what it looks like can be so diverse, but richness, right? Bringing in the child sitting at the kitchen table all day long, slaving away over their curriculum. I'm sure it happens, but it's kind of this is where the myth of like the unsocialized homeschooler comes from, right? I don't know anyone who's done that, where the child's just at home alone all day by themselves. They are out in the community. They are, like I said, multi-age. I always joked that it wasn't homeschooling because I was never home because we were always out doing something.
Wow, that makes so much sense when you're explaining it this way. I'm so glad we're recording this so other people can start to see this, because, sometimes when I'm doing the dishes and I'm cooking, I've got this weird isolationist idea like, oh, I gotta just leave me alone. I got to do my stuff. But if I think about back when I was a child and my family had a 2-acre organic garden, and I would sit with my mom and we would just shuck the peas. And then we would, go with my dad and we would pick the strawberries. And it was way more fun because you were doing it with someone. It wasn't, again, like you said, the slaving, like this forcing. And Yeah, and I honestly, that's the part of homeschool I was rejecting. I was like, oh, I'm not, I can't make him go off and do his work and me go off and do mine. The idea of having experiences together seems really rich. And then they grow up. It's funny when I meet people, I can tell if they were homeschooled.
Yeah.
Like if I meet a 17-year-old who I would trust with a newborn baby, I'm like, they're homeschooled. Because and the ageism, like there's something about the way they act. They haven't been slotted in. You have to only be with people your age. And there's that intergenerationality that actually is the way humans have always lived, is
Exactly.
with many age groups. So, and yet we have these digital jobs. We're living in a very expensive place. What, yeah. So talk about other things that work and don't work with homeschooling.
Well, there's lots of options as far as help. So like I knew someone when I was homeschooling my oldest, she was a professor at UCSC, full-time professor. And she set it up that she did a homeschool program through Ocean Alternative Education Center, which is a public school. It's not a charter school. It's a public school independent studies program where you could go 2 days a week and then you were home the other 3. And she set it up she just rotated with other families. And so her child would homeschool with them on those days. And then she took a day once in a while. And so you can homeschool in the evenings. If you work during the day, they could do their more homeschooly type curriculum if that's how you wanted to go about it at night. And so it can work even if you are a working family, but you can do it totally independently. You can do it with the help of a charter school or a public school independent studies program. You could do it with the help of a private school satellite program where you're getting coaching, you're getting help with curriculum choices, you're getting support. You could do it. You could hire a private tutor and have a credential teacher tutor your child. So there's lots of options of like exactly how you want it to look, with as much support or as little as support as you feel you need. A lot of homeschoolers want a lot of support at first. They're kind of scared, especially if they started in public school and then pulled their child out and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. They want a lot of support, and then they gain the confidence, and then they kind of need less and less of that support, and more they want community then.
Okay, that's a key part, is community, because like we've already hinted at the possible loneliness of sitting at a table and slaving away being worse than sitting in a group at a high school where everybody's trying to sneak jokes or something, right? So
I would say that's the misconception, right? That the unsocialized weird homeschooler sits alone at their table. It's a total
that's what I'm saying, is you're saying that's just not the right way to homeschool. That's not even what people are doing. And yet that's all someone who's been in a public school model could envision, also out of the fear of not being able. Oh, okay. And we're going to talk about community, but I'm going to share one of the mistakes I made. I was like, oh, you just sign this piece of paper, send it off to the state. I'm a private school. Okay. And he studied his butt off, and he did the survival skills, and he was doing all this math, and he had a very broad ranging experience, great education, upped his academic skills. Awesome. And then we went back into school, and they were like, we're going to throw all that away. I was like, no.
Was it high school?
It was high school. It was high school. And yet we figured out later, we figured out a way to navigate, but that feeling of doing work and it being thrown away was an awful thing. And yet it was also quite a lesson. Like, dude, test him. I was like, give him a test and you'll see he's performing way better than he was a year ago, like 2 years ago. And I was like, I can prove every single bit of work. And the fact that the system wasn't tied at all to results was one of the best lessons that Sebastian got, is like, oh, there are sometimes these hoops people just make you jump through for no reason. Yeah. And then from that point on, he wouldn't settle with curriculum where you're just sitting around wasting time all day. He was like, I'm just going to boom, get the work done. Yeah. So let's talk about, and yet the reason he wanted to be back in the school was the community, the bigger pool, meet some girls. Yeah. So let's talk about community.
Yeah, so community is important, and there's lots and lots, especially we're in Santa Cruz County. We have lots of different programs, but usually there's local homeschool groups. Like we have a Facebook group called Home Cruisers. There's Christian Homeschoolers of Santa Cruz. There's, I don't even know how many charter school independent studies homeschool programs we have where it's instant community. So you sign up, you homeschool. Usually you can homeschool at home full time, or you can do 1 or 2 days a week at the school program, or you come for classes or meetings. But it has instant, plays, after school programs, sports, some of them. So that's, I would say, the easiest way to get community is to join a independent studies program, or like I said, a Facebook homeschool support group or group in your community. Meetups, just reaching out like, hey, I'm a homeschooler. Who wants to go to a park day today? That's kind of how we did it back in the day. And yeah, you have to find your tribe, but homeschooling is blowing up right now. So there's so much out there to find your people. So it's not a problem.
Yeah. And I didn't know how to do that. Honestly, that's the whole tribe element. I'm so glad you're mentioning all these resources, because there's less stress when there's support, when there's, and you're not the only one, and you've got other moms doing. I was worried about the amount of driving because I lived way out in Bonnie Doon, and I was like, oh, and yet the amount of driving I was doing to support a public school lifestyle was tremendous. So I really didn't realize I wasn't comparing apples to apples. Yeah. So okay, what about well, and let's talk about my little faux pas with the messing up the credits with high school. So tell me about, how could someone anticipate, like your daughter who decided, oh, high school, I'm going to do public high school. What extra steps did you have to take the closer you get to college? Okay, let's talk about both ends of the spectrum. We have closer to college, there are different on-ramps.
Yeah.
And yet I've heard some of these some colleges don't have all these weird rules, and you could just possibly pick the best college that will never make you jump through some of these hoops. The other is like when you've got the littles and you don't want to do daycare, but they're kind of preschooly. Like also, is there already a homeschooling point of view down at these two upper and lower ends?
Yeah, so let's talk TK through 8th grade. The TK through 8th grade, you could do the charter school, you could do all the things. It's very free because there's no consequence as far as credits for high school and college and things like that. So for TK through 8th grade, I would say choose whatever works for your family. Don't worry about high school yet. If it's filing your own private school affidavit and starting your own school and going that way and going completely independent, go for it. Like, just do whatever works for your family. And the thing with community and kids, as they get to high school age, they kind of want, like you said, they want sports, and my daughter wanted cheerleaders and football and things like that. So it gets a little trickier if you know for sure your child is not going to want to go into the public school system in high school, then you can keep doing your PSA and whatever worked for you before, and that doesn't matter. But if your child may want to, let's say sophomore, junior year, they've been homeschooled and they want to go back into the public school system, and you've been doing a PSA, which is that's the private school affidavit where you file your own paperwork to be a school. The local high schools, a lot of them, and it's school by school, but they won't take your credits that your parents gave you for your school because it wasn't from an accredited institution. So if you have a freshman, sophomore, if you did it freshman year, you can go in as a sophomore and catch up.
Yeah, it was freshman year with us.
You won't get credit if you did it independently, but you can catch up in the 3 years. So it's not a super big deal. If you want to go in as a junior, it's trickier. So I recommend then, if you're still wanting to homeschool, but your child might want to go back to public school, is doing it through either a charter school or one of the public school independent studies programs, because they are accredited. They will take those credits. So you can still totally homeschool, but for credit transfer, that would be the easiest with no problem.
Is that expensive? How do you do that? Is that expensive?
Oh, it's free. So they're just public charter schools. So like where we live, AFE, Ocean Grove, those types of things. And so they send them the transcripts, and it comes from an accredited school, even though they were homeschooled, because you have meetings and stuff. And so the accredited school gives you credits for what you're doing at home. Yeah.
Do they have vaccination requirements for those?
Not if they're not coming to classes. So some of them are they're like umbrella programs. And so you register with them, you sign up, you have a meeting usually once a month, you bring in samples, you have consultants, they give you money sometimes for curriculum. You're still homeschooling, but all your work they give you credit for through their accredited program. So they're making sure that you're jumping through the minimum California requirements. So you lose some independence, but it's the benefit of your child being able to go back into the public school system in high school. Like I said, 8th grade and below, it does not matter. 9th through 12th matters for that reason. Awesome. Another option is to do whatever you want. And then they have to take your child in school, so they could enroll them. They might not graduate from that school. They might not have the time to catch up, since they wouldn't give them credit for what they did. And they can take the GED or the HiSET, the high school proficiency test. So they wouldn't get a diploma from the high school. They would get an equivalency test. So that's an option.
Is there any stigma around that in terms of later going to college or employment?
There's some stigma, but it is the legal equivalent of a high school diploma. So you kind of have to weigh, like, if you want I got my GED. Honestly, there is, but there shouldn't be.
And I know that I had that in my back pocket is no matter how this goes, we could always take a test and then immediately go to college. Because we knew college was an eventual plan, that it wasn't going to. And in fact, I learned from you about the dual enrollment option at the local community college, where homeschoolers could sometimes almost complete an associate's degree before at the same time they're graduating high school. So I was like, wow, that's a speedy path.
Yeah. And then another option, if you just want to do it independently, is like your local community college. They can accept people without a high school diploma. If you can show them that you can do the work, they can accept you. So, and then once you're in college, your high school doesn't matter anymore. So if you're at a community college, you do your 2 years, you have your transfer credits. That is what the colleges are looking at. They don't care about high school. So if you want to go that more independent route and do your own thing, there are options. So don't feel like you're stuck. And like I said, the high schools still have to accept them. So they still can enroll. They have to be vaccinated. They still have to enroll. They just might not be able to graduate from the institution.
Wait, say that again. Might not be able to graduate from.
Well, let's say your junior you've been homeschooling them independently, and then they wanted to go to junior year to the local public high school. They won't be able to get a diploma from that. They don't have the time. And so they won't let them walk, and they won't give them the diploma, but they can still go.
Yeah. And the community college option in California is a pretty vital resource. It's free. Yeah. And I heard Cabrillo here in Santa Cruz, Cabrillo is the best, was ranked the best community college in at least California, if not the United States. It's a treasure over there.
We're very lucky.
And one of the themes that you put out there early on that I kind of want to emphasize again is figuring out who you are. What do you love? That was my biggest mistake, being like a very mainstream public education person. I was just like, I'm going to get perfect grades. I'm going to be a valedictorian. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to be an engineer. Because once I hit college, I was like, I don't know who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
I went through this whole rebellious streak. I dyed my hair pink. I spray painted my car. I started dancing on rooftops. And I was figuring out, because I was like, I can't believe I lived in I was living for other people's idea of who I was, not what I intrinsically loved. And eventually, though, the cool thing is I'm a lifelong learner, though. That was the upside, is I never got in that trap, like, oh, once I got that engineering degree, I'm done for life, right? And there's the people, even there's research about people who even retire early, how their brain just goes to mush because they stop really actively
Learning.
engaging and learning. Yeah. So lifelong learners. So what are some of those tips for, I mean, first of all, you're talking about creating a, I've heard this theme with what you're saying, and all the health people I talk to here too, stress,
Yeah.
reduce the stress so that then the true, there's space for the true and the original and the love, I guess, the love of learning to emerge. Any hints about that?
Well, I would say if you're thinking about homeschooling, the thing you need to really sit with is, can I trust myself? And can I trust my child? Like, you need to have the trust in yourself that you can do this, and the trust in your child that they can learn in order to do it and not be worried the whole time. Because if you're going to do it and be worried the whole time that your child's behind, that you're not doing, here's, I would say, the homeschool, like the biggest homeschool parent dilemma is this feeling of, we're not doing enough, where they might be behind. So and so speaks 3 languages and mine only speaks 1. Because you hear of the homeschoolers that speak Latin and they're the classical ballerina and they speak 5 languages, and so and that they exist, they're real. But we want to let go of that pressure to be that homeschooler if it's not on our path and that's not going to bring us joy. And to let go of this pressure of, like I said, the system, and trying to keep up with the system that you're leaving. You're leaving it for a reason and you're rejecting it for a reason. So don't keep holding to its standards. Embrace what you're choosing and trust yourself and your child that you can do this. And that will give you the joy, because doing it without the joy, and it's not like you're going to be not stressed ever and it's just this perfect wonderland all day long. But in general, you need to have that joy, because what's the point otherwise, right? That's why you're doing it.
Wow, what that is so true. Also, when part of my journey was having to mostly leave the emergency medical system, I saw there was so much, so little addressing of the root things that create vital health. There were so many dangerous and depleting practices that were just normal and common, and it took some really frightening things for me to realize that I could fully trust myself. And
Yeah.
then the number of options and the enjoyable, the pleasurable, the sunshine, the feet on the ground, the lifestyle that has emerged is far more beautiful than one where I kept thinking someone else would have the answer outside of me.
I'll tell you something. My oldest son is 22 now. He's launched into the world. He ended up going to a small charter school for high school. So I homeschooled him through 8th grade, and then he went to a small charter high school. And he told me one day, I think he was, I don't know, maybe a senior, and he said, "Mom, I just want to talk to you about something." He's like, "All of my friends at school, they're kind of depressed and anxious and they're not happy with life." He's like, "I love my life." He's like, "I love learning. I love being outside. Like, I love who I am." And he said, "I know this, like, it made it all worth it." He said, "I know it was a sacrifice for you, because I didn't work. I just worked part-time a little bit, so I wasn't developing my own career. But he's like, I know it was a sacrifice to you." He's like, he's like, "Because of what you did, I am who I am." And he's like, "I want to thank you." And I was like, oh. And he's this
Wow.
really cool person who still loves learning, and he gets really in depth into things and like becomes an expert, and he's just different. He can talk to adults, he can talk to, like, other people are always commenting on like what an interesting person he is and how unique he is and how he looks you in the eye. And it's but seeing the outcome of all that sacrifice and things that as a human mom I put aside for myself to give this to my children, really speaking career wise, it was, I am never going to look back on my life and go, "Oh my gosh, I wish I didn't do that." It was
Wow.
so worth it.
I love that story. With my son's health crisis, I put aside my Amazon career. I was like, no, this is my job. And the stress went way down.
Yeah.
And that changing of the reversing of both of these things. It was unwinding a little bit from the education pressure. But I will say one thing that is real is family pressure.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not. But his cousin went to Stanford and has 10 this, and comparing, like, are you sure, and like having the confidence to be able to withstand the outside pressures from other people that really they may never fully understand what's going on for
Yeah.
that child. Yeah. And you've hinted there are extremely talented people that are wasting their time sitting around in a group, wasting their time just because, and honestly, as there are more neuroimmune diseases, whether it's from vaccines or chemtrails or glyphosate, and I think glyphosate is the biggest one. The classrooms, what, in California, 1 of every 12 boys is autistic or something. So it's hard to even trust that a public classroom is going to be easy for any of those people to focus in.
No, I would say your average child, it isn't.
And with the fluorescent lights, and like I'm glad when he can, like Seb is on his way home now actually because he wants to do his art in natural light. I'm like, yes. And he notices how depleting some of the environments are. So one thing I wanted to say is we've talked a little bit, sometimes super focused independent people thrive in homeschool, but I would say that the reduction in stress is similar for people who feel like they've got more challenges learning, because you take the stress off of always comparing yourself to other people. And then if you could catch that little bit of, like, even whether even ADHD is a diagnosis, what is it, I don't even know. But one thing is, if someone loves to hyper focus on something, unless it's, well, okay, not to the point that you would play video games for 24 hours. So what about that kind of child where they're quote distractible, quote ADHD? How do you see this? And my guess is because you're decreasing the stress that somehow, but okay, part of my lack of trust in myself is, at least 4 or 5 years ago, I wasn't very good at setting limits. But then there's also the educational school of thought where we're self-regulating beings, and eventually we set our own limits. So can you talk a little bit about that? If you're a parent, but now I'm a limit lover. Now I'm a different person now. Can you talk a little bit about that dance with someone who is quote ADHD and they can hyper focus on something like a video game, and the mom may or may not be confident that she can set whatever limits it takes for this to be a positive experience?
Yeah, I would say it's a journey. And so you just have to try stuff. And, like as a parent homeschooling, you're learning too. So you might go in, I can't set limits. I don't know how to do this. This isn't going well. And it might not be going well. And together as a family, you're going to figure it out. So you might realize, we need to be outside for, my son or daughter needs to be outside chopping wood and doing more active things with their bodies. And I'm going to get in math through, feeding the goats and planting a garden and building a shed, and getting them physically active. It's just a case-by-case basis of finding your path. And in homeschooling, everyone becomes, right? So it's not just the child who's becoming and learning and growing. As a parent, you're learning and growing and becoming alongside them. And so you'll figure it out.
Right. And the parent, if they have certain boundaries, they need to be able to focus for work, whether that means someone else, a schedule that's diverse with other families. Yeah, I learned, I didn't realize just how social and wanting to connect to other people, like that my son became. And so we're looking at a different flavor of education coming to work out that superpower, rather than just forcing. Well, he might be an engineer who can communicate. Fancy that.
It gives you the freedom to try things, right? So you try something and that didn't work. All right, well, let's try. You're not stuck in this one size fits all model where you have to conform. So you can try this, try that. Nope. Oh, that curriculum worked for 6 months, throwing it out the window. We're getting a new one. Doing this schedules work for this amount of time, and now we're going to switch it up. And so you have the freedom to just trial and error until you find what works for your individual family and your individual child.
I passed along a quote about being a mother the other day for Mother's Day. So this is our Mother's Day podcast. So, and it was something like, behind every great kid is a mom who's pretty sure she's screwed everything up. And that's the hard thing. Okay, that's why they do all these comparative and benchmark, like, oh, by 8th grade, by 7th grade, they're doing all of this so that if there was, in terms of these larger, more rigid systems, these public systems, there's a reason they have these levels and standards. And so, and it's the same in the movement world. Like, I'm teaching spiraling biomechanics, and our criteria for success is based on what's going to work in 100 years. It's not based on the same metrics that someone else is using. And yet, without some kind of metric that you're actually reaching your goals, it's easy to get lost and actually be investing a lot of work into something that's making you worse.
Yeah.
So building those, some sense of a standard, how do you even go about building some sense of a standard when you're, so that moms have the confidence that they aren't screwing it up?
Well, you can also go by the state standards, which I don't necessarily recommend, but if you just wanted an initial, like, okay, here are some ideas of what at this age this child should kind of be able to do, I don't recommend that. I recommend, as a family, sitting down and deciding your own standards ahead of time. What does success look like for us? How do we know we're being successful at this? Well, my child can, it could be as simple as my child can, know their sounds, know their letters. My child can look someone in the eye when they're talking. My child can work on a task for 10 minutes. My child can. So that's the nice thing about homeschooling, is you get to create your standards for yourself. So I definitely recommend setting them, and then you can decide how far are we from them, or do we need to let go of those standards? Do we need to put in new ones? But create your own metric of success, so you have a North Star to shoot to, like in a business, right? You're running a business, you have your North Star of what your goals are. Create a family mission statement, create some family principles that you run by, that you operate by. And then you'll know whether you're meeting your own personal standards, which I think is way better than the government's. Because, like I said, that's why you're leaving those, because you want to create your own version of what you want for your family.
Well, I love that. And then we can tie it. Yeah, that's beautiful. And like the way I look at the body, one of my standards is if you can sprint till the day you die. That is not a standard out there. And people are just hoping not to die. They're just like, I just don't want to die. Yeah, I just don't want to fall down. I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, but the interesting thing is, the solution to the one works for the other. And so what you're saying is just take the best of that. The idea is having standards. The idea is being clear and aiming at, gently, organically aiming, course correcting, shifting, and you have space to do that when you're homeschooling that you don't in a group education.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't even mean group, because you can learn a lot, and your kid might thrive in groups. They might like to do more alone. What were you going to say?
What was I going to say?
Course correcting, picking your path.
Yes, that like, you'll know when you're on the right path, because you both will feel joy. You'll feel engaged. You'll feel happy. You'll know when you're not, like, that this is not working, when you're trying to force something and everyone's miserable and you're all stressed out and you're feeling horrible and no one wants, like the whole family's you'll know you're not on the right path. You need to do something differently. So don't keep forcing that just because it's someone else's standard, or you think you have to do this. If it's not bringing you joy and it's not working, let it go. And maybe it's something you come back to later or you tweak in some way, but I would say keep joy as your metric of if something's working or not. And like I said, you're not going to be in joy 24/7, and that there's never going to be any hard times or frustration. But in general, I would say keep that as your North Star and your
North Star. And and running, it should feel enjoyable. No one should force running. It's jogging, especially. No, I just float. I just fly. It's so fun. And one thing that you're saying in there is that, that the you'll know if it's enjoyable, and if it's not, you make changes.
Yeah.
And you alluded to a study early on that these kids who are unschooled, but they probably had a really rich homeschool experience.
Yes.
When they were 12, they learned all the arithmetic in 6 months. There's something to systems like Waldorf that respect the natural growth cycles and the natural developmental cycles of, for example, what is it? Well, Steiner would say only when the eye teeth come in, that's when they're ready to start like writing or studying reading and writing. And yet moms like me were like, you better read as a 3-year-old or I'm going to be so sad.
Yeah, I have a friend. Well, my oldest son's friend. So we homeschooled. She completely unschooled her son. So they did go to we did a Ocean Alternative Education Center. So it was where you go 1.5 days a week and they have some fun stuff. And he lived a very rich life. He had built a forge as a child and he was forging his own knives and he loved plays. But he was unschooled. She never once in his entire life sat him down and said, you have to do a math worksheet. And he was unschooled through 8th grade. And then he went to the same small charter high school that my son went to. And he hadn't done any formal math where he was like, written math worksheets. And so they put him in algebra or integrated math 1, which is kind of like algebra 1. And he did struggle a little bit. He didn't even really understand like how, like writing an essay, like where you put your name and date and all that stuff. And in math, he was kind of like, okay, this is taking me a little while to figure out. For a couple of months, he struggled a little bit. And then he's like, oh, I got it. Like I get the whole system of how worksheets and curriculum and stuff work. And he went on to get a full ride to Stanford. He had like a 4.8 GPA. He was in all AP classes. He just graduated last year from Stanford. As a really cool, awesome, unique person who knew how to learn and loved learning. And so, yes, he did have a couple months of having to figure out advanced math, never having done a math worksheet, going to algebra 1. And then once he got the hang of it, he just flew. And so because he had that foundation of loving to learn.
And learning how to learn. One thing that might help all of us remember our power is that no one teaches a baby how to walk.
Exactly.
That baby falls and they just want to walk. And almost all of them, there are a few developmental patterns, but even the ones who have developmental obstacles, with a tiny bit of support from certain therapists, we almost all walk. And yet no one taught us how to do. We taught ourselves. And it's having that willingness to fail and course correct and know how to take a fall. Yes. So that you fall in love with the process of learning.
Yeah.
Well, so Carol, don't be afraid. And also in terms of, even if you're getting older, there are tactics for falling where, just like in Aikido, you recycle the energy. We don't really have to be afraid of very many things. Well, okay, I'm afraid of the government. I'm not going to lie about that. Okay, so Carol Bowles, Bowles, consultant and has a private school support for homeschoolers. They can find you at seacliffacademy.com and Acton, Acton.
Acton.
Acton Academy.org.
It's actonsantacruz.org is our Acton Academy. So yeah, Sea Cliff Academy is a private school satellite program for homeschoolers. So if you don't want to keep your own records, you don't want to fill out the private school affidavit, you want someone else to do all that, that's what Sea Cliff does. And then Acton Academy Santa Cruz is a learner-driven homeschool program where it's not a school, so you need to be enrolled somewhere else, but you can come for classes. You can come 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. So your homeschooler can come be around other people, learn cool stuff.
Okay.
So you can just.
And you do consulting. Talk about that a little bit. Talk about that a little.
Yeah. So let's say you're a brand new homeschooler. You're like, I don't know what to do. We can just have a conversation and I can go over come up with an individual plan with you, help you with curriculum, help you decide your choices. Or I can meet with you once a week, once a month. So I kind of give families as much or as little support as they want. Like I said, you can enroll with Sea Cliff, and so you don't have to do your paperwork. And then I can kind of help you as you go through the process. So yeah, my range varies of what I can help you with.
And if I think about it now, if I'd have invested more in time with you, that year of my son doing all that hard work that had results, so he still got it in his body. We still have it as a learned experience, but it could have saved him a lot of time. And so the good news is, from our failure, actually, now that he's at Cabrillo, he is making sure that every single thing he does is going to line up for the next shot until, and actually that's one of the beautiful things about Cabrillo. I was like, just study around until you figure out who you are. That's why I'm not going to be sending you to a really expensive college, because you just need to figure yourself out, because we all need to know ourselves, don't we? And what we love.
Yes. So he got the true gem in it.
He got, and I did too. But I did get a little PTSD, because every meeting after that, I was like, did we get the credit? I was like, I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty. But no, that's one reason I'm redeeming myself here with this podcast with you. I'm going to make sure that my young mom friends have a good lay of the land, so that they make the decisions early on that will end up with the best outcomes for their whole family. And public school is free. That might be the plan for a working mom. I was a working mom. I appreciated having some support during the day. And yet you gave me some ideas for other ways to build support. And honestly, one last thing I'll close on. So I study ancestral cultures, or, ones that aren't as industrialized, to see how we were designed to move before we were mostly sitting and using machines and things. And you'll see someone who's got beautiful physical integrity carrying their body weight on their head effortlessly. They're just floating along effortlessly. And you think someone of a Western mindset would be like, how do I get this giant weight on my head? And like they would wreck themselves trying to copy. What they don't see is the whole culture around the way that thing got on that person's head, the culture that came from the way that person was carrying their babies, or they were carried as a baby, and that this is continuum, and that group of people lifting that thing onto her center so she could carry it herself. So you're talking about all these other ways to get support that someone trapped in an urgency mindset might not consider, the neighbors, the other families, the public homeschool support tools, the private homeschool support tools, the counseling, and the completely courageous unschooling. That sounds so terrifying. That sounds terrifying. Okay, well, Carol, I'm so glad that you are on my show, and I'll make sure that these correct links and how to contact you are in the show notes.
Thank you.
So homeschoolers, especially if you're in California, reach out to Carol.
Yes, and you can do it. I want to tell parents, you can do it.
You can do it. You can do it. I almost did it, and I didn't get nearly as much help as you can get. You can do it. Okay. All right, Carol, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.